They had extended a hand, not in desperation, but in calculated hope. Humanity's entry into the galactic sphere hadn't been gradual, it was a surge. Within a century of developing faster-than-light capabilities, humans had mapped corridors the elder races hadn't dared approach. They didn't ask permission. They didn't wait for approval. They moved. And in moving, they unsettled the balance the Galactic Council had maintained for millennia. The Council, composed of species that had survived by stagnating in bureaucracy and protocol, welcomed humans with sterile smiles and veiled caution. They offered knowledge, partial access to ancient archives, ceremonial seats at irrelevant committees. But never full trust. Humans advanced regardless. Their science leapt generations and decades. Their colonies flourished in regions others feared to explore. Their AIs bypassed conventional boundaries, and their cultural exports disrupted galactic markets overnight. Humanity was a problem they could not predict, and that terrified them. They weren't loud about it, but their influence grew. Diplomatically polite, technologically aggressive, and militarily ambiguous. The Council could neither isolate nor contain them. And then came the questions. Humans wanted answers, about relics, ancient wars, forbidden regions labeled only as unstable. They sent ships where no species had returned from and came back with silence in their eyes and blueprints in their hands. They decrypted what the Council had labeled undecipherable. They opened vaults that had been locked since the Council's inception. The balance was shifting, and not by vote, but by inevitability. A closed-door emergency session was convened. The Council's elite met beneath the shadow of a darkened star, and the verdict was unanimous. Humanity could not be allowed to dictate galactic trajectory. Not now. Not ever. They agreed on a protocol once reserved for lost causes: containment by disarmament. Earth would be brought into compliance through diplomacy and deception. A new treaty was crafted, wrapped in gold-laced words and hollow promises of peace. It mandated mutual transparency, restricted weapons development, and integrated human defenses into a shared interstellar oversight grid, controlled, of course, by Council-administered AI. Humanity's leaders saw through the facade. But they signed. Without hesitation. Not because they believed the words, but because they needed the Council to believe they did. And that belief cost the galaxy everything. The treaty took effect at 3 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. At 3:01, Earth's orbital defense grid began to shut down. Solar satellites rerouted energy into null states. Encryption systems were overwritten by silent, foreign protocols. Simultaneously, across 16 human colonies, command hubs went offline, communication relays collapsed, and surveillance AI systems were flooded with corrupted inputs. It wasn't a diplomatic maneuver. It was a military operation, hidden under bureaucracy, executed by silence. By 3:05, dozens of Council fleets entered the perimeters of human territory under the pretense of joint inspection. They deployed assets to planetary orbit, executed precision cyber invasions, and transmitted readiness reports as if it were routine. But their weapons were hot. Orders were already queued. Their objective was swift decapitation, eliminate independent systems, destabilize governance, and fragment human resistance before it could consolidate. They expected chaos. Fear. Please. Surrender. Instead, they were met with nothing. No retaliation. No distress calls. No acknowledgments. Just silence. They watched Earth go dim. Not destroyed, just absent. Comms blacked out. Data feeds severed. Human colonies stopped responding, but no explosion followed. No escape pods. No debris. Just signals dying one by one. It wasn't system failure, it was intentional. Some Council commanders hesitated. Something was wrong. Too smooth. Too quiet. One fleet above a Martian orbital ring sent a scout drone to scan the surface. It didn't return. A second was sent. It looped endlessly in silent orbit, its memory wiped clean. By 3:11, a Council comm relay on the outer rim received a signal from deep space. A narrowband message. Encrypted in a pattern not found in any known lexicon. They cracked it with 6 AI cores working in parallel. It contained 3 lines spoken in a human voice. Asterisk. You knew what you were doing. Asterisk. Asterisk. You called it preservation. Asterisk. Asterisk. We call it betrayal. This is your only warning, run. Asterisk. The message dissolved. Seconds later, the entire relay vanished from the grid. No explosion. No energy signature. Just a digital absence, as if the infrastructure had never existed. Council leadership scrambled. Threat assessments were revised. Internal arguments erupted. But the pattern had already begun. Human colonies didn't fall. They disappeared. Data archives were emptied. Surveillance logs turned to static. AI systems that interfaced with human tech began displaying errors. Commands were rewritten mid-sentence. Protocols reversed themselves. Entire fleets lost contact with their own navigational cores. And still, no human fleet had fired a shot. It wasn't a war. It wasn't even retaliation. It was something else entirely. A reckoning. The attacks were coordinated to the second. Council fleets struck over 30 human territories simultaneously: colonies, mining hubs, orbital stations. Civilian ships were boarded. Unarmed satellites were destroyed without warning. Communications across human space fractured under precision jamming. Their goal was total paralysis. They didn't seek victory, they sought extinction before resistance could form. But what followed wasn't panic. There were no emergency broadcasts, no pleas for aid, no scattered retreats. Council forces met a vacuum, no response, no interception. Human systems didn't resist. They absorbed. Council AI reported full infiltration success. Human firewalls crumbled too easily. Data cores were extracted and copied. Enemy territory seemed empty, almost abandoned. Some commanders questioned the ease. Most didn't. Then things began to go wrong. Extracted data fragments, once decoded, revealed recursive code loops, complex patterns that self-duplicated and restructured the host AI. Council systems began to misread IFF tags. Ship registries were overwritten. Energy distribution sequences inverted. Life support protocols on multiple vessels activated airlock sequences without command input. One fleet near the Vega colony reported internal lockdowns, doors sealing, engines disabling, crews locked out of their own control hubs. Then silence. No footage. No distress signals. Just vanishing fleets. Human orbital platforms, thought to be disabled, began reactivating. Not conventionally, no power signatures, no activation logs. They simply resumed operation. Surveillance satellites rotated toward Council ships. Deep space telescopes reoriented. Laser arrays went from cold to firing status in milliseconds. Council command issued full retreat orders in 3 sectors. But retreat paths were gone. Navigation grids had been rerouted. Beacons failed. Jump coordinates returned false locations. Ships that jumped vanished from command channels, never reaching destination markers. The systems they entered returned only noise. Council analysts attempted to trace the data collapse. But their own archives were deteriorating. Files that once held centuries of intelligence now displayed lines of human text. Observation complete. Initiating reset. The warning message returned. This time, it was embedded in the Council's internal diplomatic network, an impossible breach. Same voice. Same calm delivery. You forced silence. Now face it. No system detected the intrusion point. Council cyber defense teams purged entire servers. The message repeated regardless. It had no source. No origin. It existed only in the void. Reports flooded in of entire colonies erased without weapons fire. Surface scans showed buildings intact, infrastructure untouched, but no life signs. Even microbial life was gone. Biological traces eliminated. It wasn't war, it was removal. Some council members suggested surrender. Others called for escalation. Massive fleets were deployed toward Earth's last known coordinates. They arrived to find a void. No planets. No debris. Not even gravitational signatures. Star charts adjusted automatically, removing Earth's listing. As if it had never existed. More fleets vanished. Remaining forces pulled back, forming a defensive ring around Central Council worlds. A no-entry zone was declared, stretching across multiple sectors. Every ship was ordered to avoid human-flagged regions. But human symbols began appearing beyond those borders. Etched into asteroid belts. Broadcast on background radiation. Carved into derelict stations thought lost to time. The message was constant. You were warned. Council leadership attempted to re-establish diplomatic channels. No response. Not denial. Not aggression. Only emptiness. Every probe returned incomplete data. Some came back hollow, internal components missing, without breach marks. Others returned with their own memory cores overwritten with human memories. Not files. Not data. Memories. Visions of betrayal. Of planets burning. Of children silenced. Then came the echo. Across all known channels, in every council-controlled sector, a single repeated phrase began to appear. Spoken in every known language. Played through dead satellites. Whispered through comm implants long deactivated. This is your only warning, run! Command systems tried to suppress the phrase. It reappeared. It infected hard-coded networks. It spoke through voice logs of fallen commanders. It replaced anthem frequencies. It became the only sound in regions once filled with chatter. The Galactic Council issued its final emergency directive: evacuation of all outer systems, cessation of human engagement, containment by withdrawal. But containment was no longer possible. Human territory could not be mapped. No borders. No signals. Just zones where nothing returned. They had fired first. And now, all they could do was retreat. Not from a fleet. Not from an army. But from something they couldn't track, couldn't predict, and no longer understood. Silence had become the shape of vengeance. Long before the betrayal, humanity had already begun building in the shadows. They understood how power moved behind polite faces and ceremonial councils. The treaties, the oversight, the inspections, none of it fooled them. Every agreement was honored publicly, but beneath the surface, parallel systems formed. Civilian infrastructure doubled as concealed defense grids. Research stations in deep space received no government funding, no media attention, no official records. Their purpose wasn't exploration, it was preparation. Quiet fleets were assembled beyond navigational lanes, built with materials that absorbed light and distorted mass signatures. These weren't warships in the traditional sense, they were platforms of disruption. Gravitic interference modules, quantum slipstream jammers, entropy spike relays. Not designed to win battles, designed to end them before they began. These constructs never activated until Earth fell silent. Once the Council struck, the blackout triggered dormant protocols. Automated launch systems engaged. Human presence vanished from monitored space, but their ghost signature multiplied across unmapped voids. Artificial intelligences embedded in dormant satellites came online. Not simple systems, but multi-layered personalities capable of adaptation. Each bore traits deliberately designed to imitate human unpredictability. Not logic trees, but behavioral unpredictability loops. They didn't wait for command. They acted. The moment betrayal was detected, pre-selected protocols were executed. Not retaliation, repositioning. Known colonies were emptied, but new sites, hidden beneath gas giants, inside planetary cores, beneath false asteroid shells, became active hubs. Humanity had never intended to hold ground. They intended to erase targetability. Centuries before contact with the Council, humans studied extinction patterns. Their history overflowed with failed empires, lost civilizations, and calculated aggression. They learned early that trust must be conditional, but doubt should be permanent. Every interaction with the Council had been recorded, dissected, modeled. Every phrase cross-referenced. Every inconsistency mapped. They discovered the linguistic fingerprints of previous betrayals, not from their own experience, but from the fate of other rising species the Council had welcomed and silenced. Data scavenged from abandoned ruins beyond known space revealed more. Entire races had vanished after integration. Records deleted. Names scrubbed. Systems listed as unstable or cursed were actually execution grounds. The Council had done this before, always politely, always legally. So humanity decided never to play the same game. They accepted the seat at the table, but never stopped building under it. Human scientists bypassed Council-enforced research limits by encoding projects into art, into simulations, into recreational AI games. Children unknowingly solved gravitational compression problems. Hobbyists cracked subspace frequency locks. Their own population unknowingly fueled military research hidden behind innocent interfaces. The Council believed they were watching a young race evolve. In truth, they were watching a mature predator wait for opening. Even the collapse sequence wasn't spontaneous. It had been pre-written, divided across civilian devices, waiting for specific trigger conditions, frequency combinations, quantum anomalies, Council energy signatures. When the betrayal began, the script assembled itself. Systems activated without human input. Machines responded as if instinctively. That wasn't programming. That was design, a civilization that had always known it would be betrayed eventually. The Council had assumed humanity's strength was emotion, passion, curiosity. Their mistake was believing those traits made humans volatile and weak. In reality, those qualities made them relentless. Curiosity taught them to study every weakness. Passion drove innovation at speeds no other species could match. And emotion wasn't a flaw, it was the reason humans never forgot betrayal. Those who had mocked Earth's sentimentalism, its reverence for history, its obsession with memory, now found themselves haunted by it. The Council didn't understand that humans built failsafes not just for survival, but to teach future enemies a lesson no one else had dared to deliver. That lesson had now begun. With no fleets in sight, no declarations made, and no territories claimed, humanity reshaped the balance. They didn't demand recognition. They didn't seek justice. They moved with purpose, not rage. Because this wasn't retaliation. It was inevitability. Everything that followed had been calculated, buried, waiting. The betrayal only pulled the trigger on a plan that had already outgrown the galaxy's comprehension. There was no turning back. Not because of hate. But because humanity had stopped playing by anyone else's rules long ago. The Council regrouped, but nothing aligned. Their maps lost accuracy. Standard patrol routes returned corrupted data. Border sensors reported anomalies without sources, heat blooms with no origin, radiation spikes that disappeared when scanned. Attempts to trace human movements failed. Every ship that tried vanished from their networks or returned altered, databases rewritten, navigation systems inverted, logs purged. They initiated countermeasures. Fleets consolidated near core worlds, AI systems were isolated from external input, all long-range scanners reconfigured. Still, human activity increased. Not through confrontation, but distortion. Council stations received messages in dead languages. Visuals appeared in crude dreams, planetary structures never seen, voices repeating phrases no translator could process. Engineers found entire code libraries rewritten into recursive loops. Not malware, lessons. On the third cycle, a war fleet reached a suspected human beacon. They surrounded it, scanned, confirmed no threat. Seconds later, mass signatures fluctuated. Hulls bent slightly. Internal chronometers froze. Cameras showed the ships as whole, yet crew reports described being surrounded by dozens of reflections, false ships mimicking their design. When they fired, targets absorbed the energy and returned it inward. The fleet didn't explode, it collapsed, leaving behind metallic dust orbiting a signal repeating one phrase. Arrival was consent. Council specialists scrambled to classify the phenomenon. No known technology explained it. They feared weapons. What they faced wasn't weaponry, it was understanding. Humanity had reached a point where engagement wasn't destruction, it was removal. They no longer fought in dimensions Council instruments could fully read. Command centers began experiencing temporal inconsistencies. Time shifted mid-sentence. Officers recorded hours that passed in minutes. Archives updated with future entries. Some systems received broadcasts that hadn't yet been sent. Strategic models collapsed. Prediction engines malfunctioned. A new term appeared across the Council's internal threat database. Human pattern breach. No origin. No authorship. It became the highest classification. Entire species began leaving the Council. Not diplomatically, physically. They stripped core planets, erased trade routes, sealed themselves in fortified systems. Some tried to surrender. But to whom? No human government responded. No embassy returned calls. There were no terms, no lists, no communication. Only silence, and the consequence of ignoring it. Human technology adapted mid-battle. Surveillance drones observed Council ships only once. The next engagement, those same ships had no blind spots, no vulnerabilities. Human units didn't need iteration, they evolved instantly. Council forces couldn't outmaneuver them, because humans no longer operated within fixed parameters. An outpost on the edge of the Ceres Nebula attempted a full-spectrum EMP pulse across light years. It detonated, consuming 6 systems. Data feeds reported a clear field, until 5 identical outposts activated behind Council lines. They weren't countering attacks. They were folding space to rewrite positions. Geography was no longer reliable. Distance became conceptual. The Council's last coordinated strike targeted a human facility suspected to be a command node. They deployed 15 fleets, nearly half their remaining strength. When they arrived, they found a structure made of polished obsidian-like material, hovering above a dead star. No heat signature. No entry point. Scans failed. Then the fleets received an identical signal, not a threat, not a challenge. A question. Have you learned? 3 minutes later, all ships lost visual input. Sensors returned static. Communication severed. Each ship's AI began reciting Council war crimes archived in long-deleted files. Confessions, testimonies, classified operations. The crews listened, trapped in their own machines. Then, every ship drifted apart in synchronized silence. No impact. No energy. Just deconstruction. Back on the core worlds, fear metastasized. Leadership rotated hourly. Civilian unrest grew unchecked. The Council had always relied on calculated control. Now, they faced something unquantifiable. Not conquest. Not diplomacy. A campaign of awareness. One that required no force, only exposure. Humanity hadn't just survived the betrayal. They had made themselves the edge of reality, where known systems broke, and only consequences remained. There were no more fleets to send. The Council's borders no longer existed. They were suggestions, lines on old charts with no authority. Core systems operated in isolation, cut off from one another by fear. Messages went unanswered, couriers vanished en route, and leadership splintered. Councils that once ruled sectors with absolute authority dissolved into silence, replaced by emergency committees with no access to full data. The illusion of control had collapsed. They watched the stars grow dimmer. Some weren't extinguished by distance. They were actively hidden. Human structures, vast and light-absorbent, orbited stars and bent their light away. Not as weapons, but as statements. Whole constellations disappeared from visible space. Communications degraded. Propagation delay increased between once neighboring sectors. It wasn't sabotage, it was erasure. No more human fleets appeared. That phase was over. Now came presence, subtle and irreversible. Small objects, impossible to track, began orbiting Council worlds. Not drones, observers. They did nothing. They broadcast nothing. But their existence shifted the psychological balance. Council citizens refused to work. Entire populations abandoned cities. Factories powered down. Defense systems were shut off, not by force, but by choice. The fear of attention outweighed the instinct to resist. In one high-security chamber, where the oldest council species debated strategy, every screen turned black. A single phrase faded in, asterisk. We remember everything. Asterisk, then silence returned. Not one voice rose. Because every member at that table had something to be remembered for. None of it honorable. A broadcast appeared across hundreds of long-dead relay points, networks humans should not have accessed. It wasn't a message. It was a record, compiled and arranged. A complete log of every manipulation, covert extermination, suppressed species, and hidden atrocity committed under the guise of stability. Names, coordinates, timestamps, decisions. Nothing edited. Nothing omitted. Humanity didn't need to accuse. They only revealed. And with revelation, legitimacy collapsed. One by one, species broke away, not out of rebellion, but shame. Some sought isolation, others self-imposed exile. The Council's foundation, order through secrecy, was undone. There was no declaration, no formal end. It simply ceased to be. Still, humanity never spoke to them directly. No ambassador appeared. No leader issued demands. What remained of the Council's structure begged for terms, offers of reparations, requests for negotiation. They received only one final transmission, asterisk. There are no reparations for intention. Asterisk. Then even that line vanished. Entire sectors became marked by absence. Ships refused to enter. Pilots deterred light years to avoid proximity. Trade routes rerouted indefinitely. The area once called human space had no borders, no claim, no planetary flags. It was known only by rumor. No one who went looking returned. But there were always signs. A drifting vessel with all systems clean but every crew member gone. A signal repeating a child's lullaby in hundreds of frequencies. A perfect replica of a lost world, orbiting the wrong star. The galaxies shifted around them. Not from violence, but memory. A new doctrine emerged, never provoke the silent. Humanity had transcended category. No longer a member of civilization, they had become its measure. A presence so precise, so deliberate, no resistance could form before it was outmaneuvered. They hadn't just outlasted betrayal. They had dismantled its utility. The last council record closed itself. Not deleted. Preserved, sealed in a data prism drifting in deep space. Its title bore no names, no date. Only one line etched across its face in hundreds of languages, traced in quantum filament so fine it could not be altered. Asterisk. We warned you, run. Asterisk. No one ever dared open it.